If you feel like sculpting the hands is hard, I'm going to show you the easiest and the most beginner friendly way of sculpting the hands in Blender. Before we actually dive into sculpting the hands, let's break down the forms of the hands. I have some references here, and if you take a look at the hand from the top view, the palm is just a rectangle with the wrist attached to it, which is also another rectangular shape, and then the pad of the thumb which is attached to it, which is also another rectangular shape. The rest of the fingers are just cubes as seen from this reference right here. Now that we know that, let's look at the palm in relation to the fingers. If you take a look at this image right here, you can see the way the knuckles are curved along the palm, and the further up we go on the fingers, this curve begins to get more steep. You can also see that right here in this reference. All right, let's take a look at a common mistake that you've probably been doing on your sculpts. So when making the bends of the finger, you want to avoid this kind of parallel shapes. That's not how the finger works. Here's how it works instead. You want to make sure that this one goes straight up, this one goes outward, and this one goes inward. So where the knuckle is at the top of the hand is a bit further from where the finger actually bends inside of the palm, and the same thing happens here, and this just makes for proper bending of the fingers. And then one last thing I want us to look at from the top view, you would also notice that the palm has some curvature to it, so it's not straight, has some curvature to it, just like this. Now that we know this, we can actually go into Blender and start sculpting. Inside of Blender, we are actually going to delete everything else except the cube. And I'm just going to set up my scene for sculpting. I'm going to split up this viewport here. I'm going to open the image editor, and I'm going to open up a reference. With that in place, we can start off with the first step, which is going to be blocking out the palm and the wrist. With the cube selected, let's go into edit mode, and we can scale this down for the palm shape. I'm going to go from the top view, and just like we indicated that the palm is a rectangle like this, let's make that shape. In this view, I'm going to select these bases, S to scale them down just a little bit, something like this for the palm. And now let's also remember the curvature on the palm. So this curve like this, let's add in a loop cut here. Let's bring this up to form that curvature on the palm. You can also add in some extra loop cuts right here. I'll select these two, and I'll just bring them up to maintain the curvature of the palm. All right, nice. Let's take a look at this image from the side view. You see that this part of the palm is much narrower than this part of the palm. So we can select these faces right here, S and Z to scale them on the Z axis, and I'll just bring them down a little bit, something like this. All right. Now that we have the shape of the palm, let's add in this padding for the thumb. Just before we do that, let's add in a loop cut right here, and I'm going to use Alt S to scale this along the normals. I'm just going to add in some more geometry right there. All right, let's make that pad for the thumb. We can add in a loop cut right here, and then we can select these faces, E, and I'm just going to extrude it down, and I'm going to scale it in, and I'll just move it this way. So now we start to have that pad for the thumb. We can select these loops and bring them down right here. Okay, let's add in some more geometry. Let's add in a loop cut right here and another loop cut right here. Now we can select these faces. We are going to extrude something like this. So I'm just going to press E. I'm going to extrude this out, and I'll just place it somewhere around here. We can go into the vertex selection, and I'll just push this around into a shape that looks like this. All right, nice. I'm going to scale this down. I'll also bring it down. We can also select this. I'm just putting this into a much nicer shape. You can also go into sculpt mode on the palm. We can use the grab brush, and we can start to pull this around Just going to pull this out. I just make the shape of everything smoother from every angle possible. Alright, I like how this is looking. Now that we've added the thumb, we might need to adjust this part of the palm. So we can just use the grab brush, pull this in. And I'm also going to adjust this. They don't need to be that wide. So something like this is going to be fine. Let's add in some more geometry. You can press Ctrl 1 to add in the subdivision surface modifier. We can go into the sculpt mode and we can further refine the shape of the palm. Okay, I want to reduce the width of the palm. I'm just going to select everything S and X to scale this in, just like so. And we can also select these loops right here and we can bring them down. Just add some nice curvature to the palm here. You can also add in another loop cut right here. Then select these ones and bring them down. Just add some padding for the fingers right here. You can also add a loop cut right here. Alright, something like this is going to work. Let's also make sure that from this top view, we have some curvature to the knuckles. So let's go into sculpt mode. I'm going to use the grab brush. So I'm just going to pull this into shape. Something like this. Now just adjust the shapes like so. Now that we have this, we can extrude out the wrist. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select these faces right here. 3 to go into face selection mode. I'm going to select these faces and we can extrude this out. And to make this more rounded, we can right click and we're going to use the loop tools and we're going to choose sepal. If you don't see this loop tools option, just go up to edits, under preferences, get extensions and just search for the loop tools add-on and then make sure you have that installed on your computer. I'm going to go back into edit mode. I'm going to rotate this on the Y axis and then I'm going to scale it down and bring it this way. Alright, so you can add a supporting edge loop here, something like that. And now that we have the wrist in place, we definitely need to adjust the shape of the palm. Now that we have that in place, I'm going to go into sculpt mode. I'm just going to pull this into shape and I'm just taking a look at the reference to see how the shapes of the palm actually is. So something like this looks just fine. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'll select everything S and Y to scale it down a little bit. Alright, that looks good for the block out of the palm. So this is the completion of step 1. Now let's go to step 2, which is going to be blocking out the fingers. The fingers are also very easy to do. I'm just going to clean this annotation line here. Alright, and to do the fingers, we're going to shift A, mesh, and we are going to add in a plane. This plane, we want to make sure not to move it from the origin point. We are going to need that. Just going to edit mode and in vertex selection mode, we can press M and then we can merge everything at center. So we just have one vertex right now. I'm going to escape to clear the location and I'm just going to extrude this on the Y axis and I'll bring this forward. We want to make sure that this vertex here remains at this origin point. I'm going to go back into object mode and we basically have a fingers. To make this actually look like a finger, let's go to the modifier and then you can add in a skin modifier and then you can also add in a subdivision surface modifier. I'm going to take the levels of viewport up to 2 and now this is our finger. To reduce or increase the size or the scale of the fingers, we can select it and then Ctrl A to either increase or reduce it. I'm going to reduce mine and I'm going to go back into object mode. And one important thing, we want to make sure to move the fingers only in object mode so that we maintain the origin point at the bottom of the fingers. So move the fingers only in object mode. I'm going to move this up right here, something like that. And I think the finger is too long. I'm just going to bring this back down like so. And now we want to create other fingers. The normal way to duplicate in Blender is Shift D. But in this case, we actually want to use Alt D to duplicate the fingers. And what that does, it copies the object data from this mesh to this mesh. What exactly does that mean? That means if I go into edit mode and I move this around, it's going to affect this other object because they are linked together. So Alt D is the shortcut you want to use. I'm just going to use Alt D again to duplicate for this finger, and Alt D one more time to duplicate for this finger. All right. Now from the front view, I'm going to move this up to follow the curvature of the palm. And then I'm going to just make sure to space this out appropriately. Don't worry about the length of the fingers for now. We are going to adjust that in a bit. So I'm just going to adjust the positions of this finger from the top view and also from the side view. Also make sure it looks good from this view. Alright, so I'm going to go into edit mode. I'll Control A to reduce the size of the fingers. Something like this. We can add in one more loop cut right here. And now to give the fingers a bit of a relaxed boost, we can select this and just move this down here so that the fingers just have a bit of a relaxed boost to them. It's going to be useful if you're making characters for animation. I'm going to go in extreme mode. I'm going to add another loop cut. So Control R to add in another loop cut right here. And this loop cut, I'm going to slide it closer to this one. And if I slide it closer to this one, I'm going to press G twice to slide it closer. And once I slide it closer, you can see that this edge right here becomes sharper. So that's exactly what we want. Okay. I'm going to also add in another loop cut right here. And I'm just going to move this down to give the fingers a bit of a relaxed shape. Something like that. I'm just going to adjust the overall proportions of the fingers. I'll move this back on the y-axis just a little bit. And something like this is going to work fine for the fingers. All right, nice. Now let's work on fixing the length of the finger. I'm going to scale this on the y-axis. So this is the pinky finger, which is the smallest. I'm going to scale it on the y-axis. I'm also going to scale this one on the y-axis. And the middle finger is the tallest, so I'm going to just leave that one as is. And S and Y, I'm going to scale this down on the y-axis. All right, nice. And now we can just spread this apart. I'm going to rotate this like so. I'm also going to rotate this one like this. I'll rotate this and I'll just move it a bit. Okay, so if you want to scale this again, if you scale this on the y-axis, we won't be scaling on the local axis. So you just want to make sure S, Y, Y, press Y twice, and then you'll be able to scale it on its actual Y axis. The same for this one. Okay, so just press Y twice to be able to scale it on its local Y axis. All right, now we have the fingers in place. Let's duplicate one of these for the thumb. For the thumbs don't look like these other fingers. So in this case, we're actually going to use Shift D to duplicate it. So they are not linked. If I change anything, it doesn't change on these other ones. Okay. So I'm just going to go into object mode. I'm going to scale this down. And once again, we want to make sure to just move this in object mode. I'm going to rotate this on its y-axis, something like this, on its local y-axis. And then I'm just going to rotate this. And this thumb is too slim. I'm going to go into edit mode. A to select everything and Control A to increase the width, something like this. And I'm just going to place this somewhere around here for the palm. Okay. So once, make sure you like the placement for that. And once you like the placement, you just want to go back and adjust the proportions. Now that I've added the fingers, some corrections that you need to make on the palm might stand out to you. So just go ahead and make those corrections on the palm. I'm just going to go ahead and make the corrections on my own sculpt, just like this. All right, now for the knuckle, we also want to make sure that this part is pointing back. So I'm just going to go back into edit mode. I'm going to select this from the side view. I'm just going to rotate this backwards like so. And I'll just place this something like this. All right. Now this looks good for the blockout. Make sure you're happy with the blockout before moving on to the next step. If you're not happy with the blockout, don't go further from this step. just make sure to refine your sculpt before you move on to the next step. The next step is going to be sculpting the hands and sculpting the fingers. So now that we have the fingers in place, they don't still look right. We need to adjust some of this shape. Okay. So we can apply the modifier that we have on the palm. I'm going to apply the subdivisions of this modifier. Now we have some more geometry to work with. I'm just going to go in with the grab brush. I'm just going to adjust the shape of the palm and make sure I like the way everything looks. I'm going to make this part of the palm much rounded, and I'm also going to smooth it out. And I'm also going to use the inflate brush, and I'm going to inflate this part of the palm just to add a bit of padding to this part of the arm. I'm also going to inflate this area like so. All right. And I'm going to take a look at the reference. You can see the shape of the padding of the thumb. So I'm just going to use the grab brush. I'm just going to adjust what I have right here. And at the thumb here, I'm going to make sure that this flows nicely into the thumb blockouts that we have. And we can also make this edge right here much sharper. So we have a sharp edge right here. So we can also do that on our spot here. So I'm just going to make this much sharper. Oh, it's nice. We can always still come back to adjust this if we need to. I'm just going to make one change here. I'm going to bring this up to indicate where the wrist actually starts from. So I'm just going to bring this up like so. And I'm also going to pull this in, just to indicate where the wrist actually starts from. All right. Now that we have that, let's also apply the modifiers on the fingers. So if you try to apply the modifier here, it's going to give you this modifier warning. That's completely fine. Another way to apply modifiers on your object, you can just select all the objects you want to apply modifier on, Control A, and then visual geometry to mesh. So select that option, and it's going to clear the modifiers on all the objects selected. Now that we have this, we can go into sculpt mode. We have more geometry to work with. And you notice that any change we make right here, it's also going to be affected on the other fingers. We want to turn on X symmetry. We can sculpt on the fingers. So I'm taking a look at the shape of the fingers here. We have a rounded shape at the top of the finger. So I'm just going to round this out. And I'm also sculpting a female hand. So I'm just going to reduce the tip of the finger. I'm going to reduce the width of the tip of the finger, something like this. And then from the side view, we also want to bring this in, and I'm just going to smooth it out like so. All right. We can also use the crease polish brush. We can mark out the crease of the fingers. We can also mark out this place right here. Something like this. And then we can use the script brush, which is this brush right here. And then you can just plane out where the fingernails are actually going to be. You just want to make that part of the fingers a bit flat. So something like this. We can further use the grab brush to refine exactly where the fingernails are going to be. So something like this is going to be just fine. I'm going to pull this back a little bit, just till I like the shape. Maybe I'll pull this back even a lot more. Okay, so something like this is looking good. Now let's also do the same for the thumb. I'm going to switch to the thumb with Alt Q. You can switch between different meshes in sculpt mode with Alt Q. I'm just going to switch between these objects. And now let's also make sure to apply all the modifiers. And just before we do that, I'll actually make a change in edit mode. I'm going to Control A to scale this up. And I'm going to bring this into the palm a bit more. Big. And I think that looks much nicer. All right, so we can now apply the modifiers Control A and visual geometry to mesh. And now I'm going to go into spot mode. And you're going to see this error here, object has non-uniform scale. We're just going to ignore that for now because we are eventually going to merge everything together. So that's not going to matter for the sculpt. Just ignore that error for now. I'm going to also turn X symmetry, and I'm going to sculpt in the shapes of the thumb. So I'm just going to make this part more rounded. I'm going to bring this forward like so, and I'm just going to scale this down. I'll actually take a look at some of the style references I have here. I like the way this thumb looks. I'm just going to model the shape after the reference like so. I'm going to smooth this part out, and I also make sure that it's rounded like so. If I make this part of the thumb much larger, we can also switch to the thumb objects and pull this into place just to make the shapes of the thumb look much nicer. Alright, and I think I like the shape of the fingers that we have. I'm going to go back to the palm a little bit and we can adjust the shapes we have. I'm just going to pull out where the knuckles are actually going to be. So just something like this, just to indicate where the knuckles are going to sit on the palm. Okay, and I think that looks good. Now that we have sculpted everything, we have made a base sculpt for everything. You can actually go ahead, increase the remesh resolution and sculpt on this even more. Let's go into sculpt mode for one of the fingers. I'm going to increase the remesh resolution 0.02, should be fine. And Ctrl R to remesh this. And instead of going over and just smoothing everything out, we can use the mesh filter, set this to smooth, and then just drag your mouse and it's going to smooth out everything for you. Gets a little bit too soft, so just be careful with that. I'm going to do it again. Just going to smooth out everything. All right, nice. Now the shape is actually too soft. We just need to go in and define some hard edges on the fingers. So the way I'm going to do that with the crease polish brush, I'm going to start with the bend of the fingers. I'm just going to mark out this bend in the crease polish brush. And I'll also do the same right here. See, I'll come to the top and I'll mark out where the fingernails is actually going to start. So somewhere around here. And I'm just going to hold down Control and I'll also mark out this part, thumb of the finger. And I'm actually going to draw in the fingernails, just indicate where it's actually going to start from. Something like this. And I'll go all the way to the top or to the tip of the fingers. Now just go over that line and place it in so that it's visible on the sculpt. Alright, let's also mark out the crease at the top of the finger. I'm going to hold down Control with the crease polish brush. I'm just going to mark out that crease at the top of the finger. And also somewhere around here, I'm going to mark out another crease at the top of the finger. I think this one comes a bit too forward, so I'm just going to move it back like so. And always make sure you're comparing whatever it is you're doing here with your reference. I'm going to smooth out this area here. I'm constantly doing that, so that's why I know which areas I need to correct. So I'm constantly looking at the reference to know which changes I need to make. So I'm just going to smooth this out. And something like this looks fine. I'm actually going to change my matte cap. I'm going to change the viewport shading lighting from studio to matte cap so that we can actually see this better. And I'm also going to outline over here. Okay, that looks much nicer. Now I'm also going to do the same for the thumb. I'll switch to the thumb object. I'll add in some more resolution, 0.02, 0.01, thereabout should be fine. Ctrl R to remesh it. I'm going to use the mesh filter. And then I'm going to smooth this out. Nice. Let's go ahead and add in some more hard edges to the thumb. I'm going to mark out the thumb, the fingernails at the thumb, like this. And I'll just mark it out all the way to the tip of the fingers. Something like this. We can also use a ground brush and pull out the fingernails and just adjust the shape of the fingernails. Something like this. Then we can smooth out these areas here. Can also use the crease polish brush and mark out the bend of the thumb. We can also use the finger brush. I will just pull this like so to make it flow nicely into the palm. Alright, it's nice. One thing you also want to note on the fingernails when you're sculpting them, you don't want to have this kind of bulge at the tip of the fingernails. So just make sure you try your best to smooth that out so that we have a much straight fingernails. Okay, I'm just going to adjust the fingers a little bit All right, I think I'm happy with this for now. Let's go over to the thumb. I'm going to adjust some of these. You can pull this forward like so. All right, this looks nice. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to increase the mesh resolution to about 0.02 or 0.01. I'm going to remesh that. And now we can use the mesh filter and then we can just smooth this out. All right, so just like we did for the fingers, we can actually go in and start adding in some hard edges. So I like to start at the bottom of the palm. I'm going to take a look at the reference and I'm just going to draw this crease on the bottom of the palm. I'm going to use the crease polish brush and I'll just draw this out like so. And this is a stylus hand, so I'm just going to draw out this part of the hand. I'm just going to make it straight. I'm also going to pull down control and mark out that crease right there. Okay, nice. We can use the in place brush to further add some volume right here. I'm going to use the in place brush and I'll just add in some more volume. And I'm going to use the crease polish brush. I'll just mark this out like so. I use the in place brush to inflate this part just so that we have that nice flow into the wrist. Something like this. You can also use the clay shapes brush to add in more volume right here. And then we can smooth this out. Can also add in some more volume here and smooth it out. Okay, nice. I'm going to adjust the shape of the palm from below. I'm going to bring this up just like so. And I'll also adjust some of these shapes that are standing out to me. Okay, right here, I noticed that the finger is popping out a bit from the palm. So we can go into object mode and I'll just pull this into the palm. Make sure you're sitting on the palm. Okay, so that's for the bottom of the palm. Let's swap at the top of the palm. Let's add in some hard edges at the top of the palm. I like to use the scale brush. I'm just going to clean out the side of the palm. Now we have this hard edge right here. We can also use the crease polish brush. While holding down control, we can just mark out this part of the palm right here. Okay, you can also do the same right here. I'm going to use the square brush. I'm just going to plane out this part of the hand. And now we have this nice edge right here. You can use the crease polish brush just to refine that a lot more. And I'm just going to make sure that the shapes flow nicely into each other, holding down shift to smooth stuff out. Okay, we can also plane further down like so. Okay, that looks nice. Let's make sure that the shapes here are clean. I'm just going to bring this down to make sure I have a much nicer looking shape around there and making sure that flows nicely into the fingers. Okay, that looks nice. We can also mark out the knuckles with the crease polish brush. We can just mark out the knuckles like so. I'm going to mark out the in-betweens of the fingers. I'll also go in the middle here and I'll just mark it all the way down to the palm, also all the way down to the palm, also all the way down to the palm for this one. Okay, nice. And then we can use the crease polish brush to mark out the knuckles. I'm just going to use the crease polish brush. I'll mark out the knuckles like so. And I'll also mark out the knuckles right here. I'll just do that for each of the fingers. And then we can just use the grab brush to make sure that we still have this nice curvature at the knuckles. Okay, something like that. I'm also going to use the crease polish brush once again. And I'll just go over this knuckle like so. We can bring this back a little bit more. And then I'm just going to smooth this out. I'm going to grab this and just bring this down to the fingers a little bit more. You can just also use the paint brush and just plane this out. can also plane this out, and we can also plane this out. So now we have a good base that we can work on. I'm just going to select these fingers and I'll just move them back into the palm just a little bit more to refine the shape. Okay, so something like this works for the hand. Can just adjust these shapes to make sure that everything works nicely together. And now we can move on to the last step, which is going to be merging everything together and sculpting everything as a whole. So make sure you're happy with the shapes, because after this stage, we are going to merge everything together. So we won't be able to sculpt on this finger and the changes will be made here. We have to do everything one by one. So just make sure you're happy with the shapes before moving on. I'm going to select the fingers and the thumb, and I'm also going to select the palm. And then I'm going to Ctrl G to join them together. And then we can remesh everything together. I'm going to increase my remesh resolution 0.01 should be fine. And then Ctrl R to remesh everything together. So what's left to do is to smooth out the transitions between these fingers and just make sure everything flows nice into each other. We can use the clay shift brush to smooth out the transition. So I'll just use the clay shift brush and go around the thumb. I'll add in some volume right here, adding volume everywhere, adding some right here and some right here, also some at the sides. And I'll just focus at the bottom for now, and then I'm going to smooth this out. Make sure everything is flowing nicely into each other. I'll also smooth this out. I'm going to use the clay shift brush, adding some more volume here, and also smooth this out, and smooth this out, and then also smooth this out. Now we have some like shapes here that we don't necessarily want, so we can just use the grab brush, pull this in, and make sure every shape flows nicely into each other. I'm just going to smooth that out so that everything flows nicely into each other. Okay, then we can do the same at the top here. I'm going to use the clay shift brush. I'll add in some volume right here. I'm also going to add in some volume right here, some more on the ring finger, and some more volume on the pinky finger, just like this. And then I'm going to smooth everything out. And we have definitely lost some detail, so we can still go in with the crease polish brush. Then we can mark out those knuckles that we sculpted in earlier and just mark them out again. And then just make sure everything looks nice. I'm going to also use the crease polish brush, mark out here like this. I'm going to smooth this out, and I'm also going to mark out this knuckle like so. Also going to maintain this crease or this sharp edge that we've had here. I'm going to use the script brush. I'm going to plane this out. Also going to plane this out, and I'm also going to plane this out. Same for right here. And just use the grab brush to make sure each shape looks nice. Then smooth out everything. Okay, let's work a bit on the thumb. I'm going to use the clay shift brush, add in some more volume right here, some more volume right here, some more volume everywhere, so that we can now go in and smooth out everything. Let's add in some more volume right here so that everything just flows nicely into each other. Okay. And then let's smooth out everything. Make sure that the shapes flow nicely into each other. I'm also going to use the grab brush, and we can pull that to make sure that the shapes flow nicely into each other. I'm also going to mark out some of these pieces that we need earlier on the palm, and then fix up the shapes. You can use the grab brush, just pull this in. Okay, so we have a much nicer shape. If you want to adjust the shape of some of the fingers, you can use the lasso marks brush. So you can select that from right here, and then you can just use the grab brush, push this one into place so that you don't affect these other ones. Okay, I'm also going to use the lasso marks, max out this one, and then I'm just going to adjust the shapes of the fingers a little bit more. Alt M to clear the mask. we're going to go ahead and just smooth out everything. Okay, you also want to go in and mark out the fingernails, and you want to make sure to take your time to mark out the fingernails. Just make sure you like all the shapes, and this is essentially the method I use to sculpt hands inside of Blender. Make sure you're happy with the shapes. Go in and define all the fingernails and all of that. I'm going to show you my final result here. So make sure you're happy with the shapes before moving on. And then you can attach this to your character and move on with the rest of the process. So this is how I sculpt hands in Blender. Now that you know how to sculpt hands, you still need to know how to sculpt faces in the most simplest way possible. Watch this video and I'll catch you guys in the next one.